Welcome, brave souls, to another chilling episode of our scary stories. I'm your host, forever lurking in the shadows, ready to guide you through the labyrinth of your deepest fears. Tonight, we have a tale that will lead you down the twisted corridors of a haunted past, and into the eye of an eternal storm of dread. A tale where the barrier between dreams and reality fades, and a woman must face her destiny to break an unending cycle of terror. So, my dear listeners, dim the lights, check under your bed, and prepare for a journey into the heart of darkness. Sarah, a woman of tender warmth yet a steely resilience shimmering in her green eyes, found herself standing at the edge of a quiet town named Cloud Hollow. It was nestled between a sprawling forest and towering cliffs, its palette of rustic reds and browns bleeding into the vibrant greens of nature. The town was hushed, except for the distant calls of crows and the rustling of leaves under the whispering wind. As Sarah gazed upon her new home, a tingling sensation of excitement and apprehension played along her spine. The house she had inherited was a large Victorian manor, imposing and beautiful in its dilapidated state. Vines clung to the weathered wood and stone facade like an intricate tapestry. Tall, narrow windows looked like unblinking eyes, staring out at the shadowy world. As Sarah stepped onto the creaking porch, she took a deep breath, pulling in the smell of the old wood, damp earth, and a faint, unplaceable undertone that sent a chill down her back. The key turned in the lock with a heavy metallic grind, echoing ominously in the silent street. Inside, the house felt colder than the outside. The air was heavy with the scent of age and abandonment, a sweet, musky odor of old books and dust. Shafts of dim afternoon sunlight filtered through the grimy windows, casting long shadows that danced upon the antique furniture. The rooms whispered of lives lived and lost, each silent artifact telling a story. A shiver of trepidation tingled at the base of her neck, as if the house was appraising its new occupant. Despite her unease, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at her new home. She roamed through the hallways and rooms, her steps echoing in the vast emptiness. The grand library with towering bookshelves, the abandoned study filled with faded maps and cryptic papers, the dusty ballroom with a phantom-like chandelier, all filled her with a melancholic curiosity. Later that day, as she was exploring her sprawling garden, an elderly woman approached from next door. Mrs. Murphy, a lean, sharp-featured woman with an unsmiling face, had a gaze that held untold stories and deep-seated fear. Sarah invited her for a cup of tea, hoping to learn more about her relative and the house's history. Over the whistling kettle and the faint, bitter aroma of black tea, Mrs. Murphy shared tales about the town, deftly avoiding any mention of the house or its previous owner. However, as the conversation veered toward the history of the house, her eyes flickered with a shadow of fear, and her words grew sparse. Seeing the change in Mrs. Murphy, Sarah's heart pounded with a drum-like intensity. She felt a prickle of fear at the unspoken words, the secrets that seemed to lurk in the corners of the house. As the sun set, painting the world in hues of red and purple, the first day in her new home ended on a somber note, filling her with a deep sense of foreboding that would only grow in the chilling days to come. As twilight cloaked the town of Cloud Hollow, Sarah found herself alone in the vast, echoing mansion. Her footsteps reverberated on the antique wooden floors, the sound muted by layers of dust and neglect. The cold night wind rustled the dry leaves outside, their restless whispers mingling with the creaking bones of the old house. It was an orchestra of shadows and quiet murmurs that underscored the solitude of her first night. The bedroom she chose was at the end of a long hallway, a room with high ceilings and a grand four-poster bed. The wallpaper, once a bright pattern of birds and flowers, was now faded and peeling. The room was chilly, the old wooden window frames groaning in protest against the night's breeze. An old gas heater stood in a corner, offering a promise of warmth that felt far from reach. With trepidation, Sarah slipped into the cold sheets. The smell of age and mothballs clung to the fabric, grounding her in the reality of her surroundings. She tried to push away the heavy sense of dread, to ignore the faint silhouette of the gnarled tree outside the window that scratched against the glass like skeletal fingers. Sleep came reluctantly. The old house sung lullabies of distant creaks, the wind whistling through unseen gaps, an undercurrent of nature's nocturnal chorus seeping in from the outside. The sounds were unfamiliar and disquieting, the symphony of an old home carrying secrets of its own. Then came the dream, vivid and horrifyingly real. It was like she had been plunged into a chilling movie, experiencing the life of her deceased relative. She saw through his eyes, heard with his ears, felt his fear crawl beneath her skin. He was a man she'd never met, yet she was within his consciousness, sharing his final moments. She was in the same house, but it was alive with whispers and furtive glances. There were cryptic symbols, clandestine meetings, the hushed voices of men and women draped in lawn cloaks. Their words were a swirl of threats and prayers, dark vows and chilling promises. Each interaction was a puzzle piece, hinting at a vast, intricate web of conspiracy and terror. And then a conclusion in a shroud of fear, a sharp, cold pain, a blinding light, and an oppressive darkness that swallowed everything. Sarah woke in a cold sweat, her heart pounding against her ribs like a desperate prisoner. The house was silent, except for the distant hoot of an owl and the continuous murmur of the wind. The dream's residue clung to her, a sticky web of fear and confusion. She lay there, staring at the dancing shadows on the ceiling, waiting for dawn to chase away the remnants of her nightmare. The line between the dream and reality seemed to blur, the images she'd seen so unsettlingly real. As morning light bled through the grimy windows, Sarah knew something was dreadfully wrong. This was not just an old house with a sad past. It was a nexus of untold horror that had ensnared her in its cold, haunting embrace. Days slipped into nights, each bringing with it the same terrifying journey. Sarah was thrust into the bewildering darkness of her dreams each night, forced to experience the last day of her relative's life from a myriad of angles, like a cruel and relentless kaleidoscope of fear. In one dream, she was at the dining table, the glinting silverware cold against her palms, and hushed voices all around her speaking in unsettling tongues. In another, she stood in the garden under a moonless sky, watching a constellation of hooded figures chant in unison. And yet, in another, she was in the library, the dim candlelight illuminating cryptic symbols on parchment. Each night was the same day, replayed in an eerily realistic and inexorable loop. Awake, Sarah found the line between her dreams and reality thinning to a fine thread. She would wake and walk through the house, seeing echoes of her dreams in the shadows of her new home. The house seemed to shift under her gaze, each room a mirror of the eerie events she had dreamt of, the walls whispering their grim stories into her ears. Her days were painted with a grim curiosity, a pursuit to uncover the mysterious connection between her dreams and her new home. As the cycle continued, the fear started to mingle with a sense of determined courage. She found herself anticipating the clues each night would bring, each piece of the puzzle she would uncover in her dreams, ready to confront them in the light of day. Her loneliness was punctuated by occasional visits to Mrs. Murphy, whose fearful gaze seemed to intensify with every encounter. The whispers among the townsfolk grew louder, the sidelong glances more frequent. Sarah began to sense the presence of a buried secret that hung over Cloud Hollow like a shroud of fog. In the afternoons, she'd find herself in the library, surrounded by the scent of old paper and faded ink. She traced the cryptic symbols she'd seen in her dreams, sifting through the volumes for any hint of their meaning, her hands moving over the same pages her relative must have once held. At night, as she tossed and turned, the house seemed to breathe around her. Each groan of the floorboards, each sigh of the wind passing through the cracks in the walls seemed like a desperate whisper of the house's untold history. The rooms pulsed with an uncanny rhythm, every corner seeming to hum with an unseen energy. Yet, through her fear, Sarah found a kernel of strength within her. Each night, she braced herself for the horror that awaited in her dreams, the ominous countdown to her relative's grim fate. She clung to the fragments of the past, seeking solace in the fact that each night brought her closer to the heart of the mystery, the roots of her inherited dread. As another day came to a close, Sarah steeled herself for the inevitable nightmare, her green eyes mirroring the flicker of determination that had ignited within her. Amid the terror, a strange resolve had settled in her heart to face the haunting cycle head-on, to unveil the eerie past of the house that was now hers. With every successive night, Sarah's dreams seemed to grow more potent, more revealing. She found herself drawn to the library, which had become a familiar backdrop in her recurring nightmares. It was a labyrinth of knowledge, dark and haunting, with books that whispered tales of the grim and unsettling, the walls echoing with a forgotten past. Sarah started to notice a pattern in the symbols she had seen in her dreams. They were omnipresent, etched onto the covers of worn-out books, inked in the margins of tattered pages, and in one chilling discovery, carved discreetly into the underside of the antique wooden desk. These symbols, once cryptic, began to unravel their secrets under Sarah's persistent gaze. Hours turned into days as she studied them, cross-referencing the strange inscriptions with esoteric texts from the library. A sinister picture started to form, one of arcane rituals and shadowy figures connected with her relative's grim past. Sarah's heart pounded with a strange mix of fear and excitement as she delved deeper into the dark history of her inherited home. Each symbol she decoded brought her closer to the chilling truth that had been hidden for years beneath layers of dust and time. In the town of Cloud Hollow, Sarah's odd behavior had not gone unnoticed. The townsfolk watched her with wary eyes, whispers of the haunted house, and its new inhabitant growing more fervent. Some saw her solitary figure in the library window, a silhouette bathed in the dim light, night after night. A few even claimed to hear strange chants on the wind, carried from the manor to their quiet homes, leaving them awake in their beds, shivering with unnameable dread. Even Mrs. Murphy, the unflappable neighbor, had grown more withdrawn. She refused Sarah's invitations for tea, and the lines on her face seemed to deepen each day, her eyes filled with a veiled terror that refused to be spoken aloud. In her dreams, Sarah found herself drawing closer to the fatal conclusion. Each dream painted a more vivid picture of her relative's final day, the fear more tangible, the dread more potent. She felt the urgency in his actions, his desperate attempts to conceal his involvement in whatever dark conspiracy the symbols alluded to. The dreams ended the same way each time, the piercing pain, the blinding light, and finally the suffocating darkness. But with each night, Sarah found herself more determined to confront the house's chilling past, to break the cycle that had ensnared her. As she delved deeper into the house's secrets, she found herself entangled in a web of shadow and fear, every piece of the puzzle revealing a darker facet of the truth. As another week passed, Sarah's life had become an intricate dance between the haunting dreams and the cryptic reality. Her green eyes held a spark of determination that glowed in the darkness, a beacon in the eerie gloom that shrouded the manor. Sarah's life had become an echoing mirror of her dreams. Each clue from her nightmares led to another revelation in the waking world. As days turned into weeks, her persistence began to pay off. The sinister symbols she uncovered from her dreams started to form a chilling story, a tale of her relative's descent into a world steeped in shadow and dread. She discovered notes hidden in forgotten corners of the library, concealed in dusty volumes, and lodged between creaking floorboards. Each piece of parchment was filled with her relative's handwriting, frantic and rushed. They spoke of ancient rituals, a secret society, and the terrible price that was to be paid. The scraps of paper formed a patchwork of terror, each sentence chilling her to the bone. Yet Sarah pushed on, the frosty winter nights echoing with the determined rustling of old papers and the slow ticking of the library clock. The truth was within her grasp, a dark thread that she could follow to the heart of her relative's tragic fate. A revelation came on a dreary afternoon when Sarah discovered a worn leather journal buried in the bowels of the library. The cover bore the same cryptic symbol she had been seeing in her dreams. Inside, her relative's confession was etched in ink, telling of his involvement with a secret society that promised knowledge and power but demanded a terrible price. As she read on, Sarah's dread deepened. The society her relative had joined was far more menacing than she could have imagined. Their rituals, performed under the cover of darkness, were linked to an ancient and malevolent force that thrived on fear and suffering. Her relative, lured by promises of power, had been pulled into their web and paid the ultimate price. Meanwhile, Cloud Hollow had grown even more quiet. The whispers among the townsfolk had ceased, replaced by an eerie silence. Lights in their homes were extinguished earlier, their doors locked tightly, and curtains hastily drawn. An ominous cloud seemed to hang over the town, its weight felt by every inhabitant. Back at the mansion, Sarah, fueled by her discoveries, was more determined than ever. She could feel the crescendo of the cycle approaching, the sense of impending dread growing stronger. Her dreams were reaching a boiling point, the images more intense and terrifying than ever. The last moments of her relative's life, the final ritual, were within her grasp. In the heart of the quiet town, under the cold gaze of the moon, the house stood silent, its secrets seeping from the shadows. Sarah knew the cycle would soon reach its culmination, the secrets of her inherited home soon to be unearthed. As she sat in the dusty library, the journal in her hands and her heart heavy with the weight of impending truth, she steeled herself for the terror that was to come. As days merged into a monotonous cycle of dread and discovery, Sarah became all too familiar with the eerie rhythm of her life. The once grand manor was now a grim stage where the past and present danced in a chilling ballet, intertwining like specters in the moonlight. She spent her waking hours in the ancient library, surrounded by the musky scent of old books and the whispers of the past, piecing together the ominous tale her dreams dictated. Night after night, the chilling narrative within her relative's journal took form, revealing a story more ghastly than any she had imagined. Her relative, lured by the intoxicating promise of power and knowledge, had been drawn into a secret society. Their sinister rituals, tied to an ancient malevolent force, demanded a terrible price, the essence of life, paid in fear and suffering. Seduced by their promises, he paid the price with his life. Sarah's dreams were an echo of the grim past. The images she'd seen, the hushed whispers she'd heard, all came alive in her relative's confessions. The secret society, the strange rituals, the unholy pact, all played a part in his ultimate doom. As each night gave way to a new day, the shocking truth revealed itself, fragment by fragment, like a jigsaw puzzle of horror coming together. Meanwhile, Cloud Hollow mirrored the growing sense of foreboding. Its inhabitants stayed within their homes, their whispers silenced, and their gazes fearful. The once bustling town was now an eerie tableau, paralyzed by an unseen dread. Even Mrs. Murphy, her eyes shadowed with silent terror, kept her distance, a silent observer to Sarah's lonely struggle. Within the house, Sarah found herself growing more determined. With every night that passed, with every new revelation, she felt an insatiable need to uncover the whole truth, to understand her relative's tragic fate. The fear that once gripped her had slowly given way to a burning resolution, fueling her through the dark nights and desolate days. The final moments of her relative's life, the culmination of the ominous cycle, seemed to be within her grasp. The dreams were growing more intense, the images clearer, and the sense of foreboding stronger. Yet Sarah braved through it all, her courage burning like a beacon in the shadowy gloom of the haunted mansion. As the end of another day approached, Sarah, with the worn leather journal in hand, prepared herself for the next step of her journey. With the echoes of her dreams still lingering in her mind, she plunged back into the world of symbols and secrets, determined to unravel the final pieces of the sinister puzzle. The seventh night arrived, shrouded in a cloak of silent dread. The moon, now shying away behind heavy, pregnant clouds, cast an eerie half-light on the manor. Sarah, driven by a courage that surpassed her fear, found herself standing at the precipice of discovery, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and anticipation. Her dreams, more vivid than ever, had begun to reveal the climactic final moments of her relative's tragic fate. She saw him writhing in pain, surrounded by shadowy figures. Each muttered chant, every flickering candle, and the awful, inhuman scream that punctuated the dreadful scene echoed in her mind long after she woke. The journal confirmed her nocturnal visions. It detailed a dreadful ceremony involving a ritual sacrifice that sought to summon an ancient force. Her relative had been both the summoner and the sacrifice, ensnared in a pact that promised unimaginable power at an unbearable cost. In the wake of her discoveries, Sarah felt the manor's atmosphere thicken with a new kind of terror. The house seemed to anticipate her next move, shadows shifting with an uncanny sentience, the silence deepening in the dimly lit library. Yet she refused to falter. A new resolve hardened her features, her gaze unflinching, her spirit unbroken. Outside, Cloud Hollow lay submerged under a sea of hushed whispers and fear-filled glances. The townsfolk, once amicable and inviting, now shuddered themselves away, succumbing to an unseen fear that clung to their quaint homes and cobblestone streets. The mention of the manor sent a chill down their spines, their whispered prayers a futile shield against the growing dread. Sarah could feel the cycle's climax approaching, the nightmares echoing louder, the journal entries darkening with each passing day. But she was ready. Each shiver of fear, each gasp of surprise, steeled her resolve further. She would uncover the truth hidden in the dark bowels of her inherited home. As the clouds above gathered, casting long, foreboding shadows that swallowed the town whole, Sarah continued her relentless pursuit. Each line of the journal, each symbol decoded, led her closer to understanding her relative's dreadful demise. Despite the terror that breathed within the walls of the manor, Sarah's heart held steadfast. She knew that she was on the cusp of unveiling a secret that had lain dormant for years, one that could free her from the dread-filled cycle. As another day slipped away, she braced herself for the revelations that were yet to come, her spirit unyielding, her determination unwavering. The eighth night fell with an ominous hush over Cloud Hollow, as if the town and its inhabitants held their breath in anticipation. The sky was a starless black canvas, and the usually comforting murmur of the woods surrounding the manor was eerily absent. Sarah, enveloped in the oppressive silence, felt the weight of the impending revelation. Her dreams were a maelstrom of terror. Each vision revealed more of the final, sinister ritual her relative was a part of. His pleas for mercy, the chants growing louder, the figures in cloaked shadows, all culminated in a scene of dreadful horror. A creature, formed from darkness in despair, was summoned from the depths of some unholy realm. Sarah woke, her heart pounding in her chest, her skin clammy with fear. She clutched the journal tightly, its pages now revealing the full horrifying scope of the secret society's intentions. They sought to summon an ancient entity, feeding off the fear and despair of their victims. The last entry was written in her relative's shaky handwriting, expressing his regret and fear of the impending doom. Through her fear, Sarah held on to her resolve. She was the last remaining thread connecting this dark past to the present. She had a responsibility to herself, to her relative, and to the town of Cloud Hollow to end this cycle of terror. Sarah noticed that the mansion seemed to reflect her determination. The usual creaks and groans of the ancient building were strangely comforting, a familiar companion in her lonely quest. Despite the looming shadows and the chilling silence, she felt a sense of belonging. As she continued her quest to uncover the truth, Sarah felt an uncanny connection to her relative. His guilt, regret, and desperation seeped through each word he penned in the journal. His final words were a plea, a desperate request for forgiveness, and a warning of the monstrous entity he had helped unleash. As the town of Cloud Hollow slept, Sarah dedicated herself to the task at hand. Each uncovered secret, every decoded symbol, led her deeper into the past, and closer to ending the cycle. She felt the knot of tension within her tighten, her resolve harden, and her fear transform into determination. With the journal's revelations echoing in her mind and the haunting images from her dreams still vivid, Sarah faced the darkest hour of her life. Yet, she wasn't a passive spectator to the unfolding terror anymore. She was ready to confront it, to end the dreadful cycle that her relative had inadvertently initiated. As she braced for the challenges that awaited her in the coming days, she was filled with a steadfast resolve. With the dawn of the 9th day, a tempest rolled over Cloud Hollow, its menacing growls a sinister soundtrack to the mounting tension. Within the gloom of the manor, Sarah wrestled with the newfound truths, her heart aching with a blend of sorrow for her unfortunate relative and steely resolve for the daunting task at hand. The nightmares were unrelenting, each one a piece of the horrifying jigsaw of her relative's demise. The grotesque entity that had been summoned, its form a swirling mass of darkness and despair, loomed ominously over the doomed ritual. The echo of her relative's terrified scream cut through the deafening chants, forever imprinted in the annals of Sarah's subconscious. In the journal, her relative's pleas for forgiveness transformed into a blueprint of redemption. He had left clues, a hidden path within his tangled ramblings, a chance to rectify his grave error. As she deciphered his cryptic writings, a glimmer of hope sparked within her. In the heart of the storm, the manor seemed to breathe alongside Sarah. Its grandeur was marred with a dark past, but it stood resolute against the stormy onslaught, its stubborn existence mirroring Sarah's unyielding spirit. Its very essence seemed to guide Sarah, offering comfort in its familiar nooks and comforting whispers of history. Even as the town of Cloud Hollow huddled against the storm, its fearful whispers drowned by the thunderous roars, Sarah found herself at the heart of the tempest. Each revelation from the journal, every decoded message, carved a path to the very core of the cycle. The rituals, the summoning, the entity, everything coalesced into a dreadful symphony of terror, its crescendo approaching with an inescapable inevitability. But Sarah was no longer a mere observer, a passive victim. She was the catalyst, the force that held the power to break this cycle. With the ghostly impressions of her dreams still fresh in her mind and the journal her steadfast guide, Sarah was ready. She had braved the twisted paths of the past, traversed the daunting abyss of terror, and emerged stronger. As the tempest outside raged on, Sarah prepared herself for the climax of this macabre tale. The cycle, once an unending torment, was now within her control. As she braced herself for the challenges that awaited her, she felt an invincible determination fuel her spirit. The darkness may have been profound, but her resolve was unwavering. The end was near. The final day was upon them. As dawn broke on the 10th day, the storm had subsided, leaving Cloud Hollow under a shroud of eerie calm. Sarah awoke from a restless sleep, her dreams offering the final piece of her relative's dreadful demise. The creature of darkness in despair loomed over his lifeless form. The ritual completed, a cycle of terror set in motion. Within the hallowed silence of the manor, Sarah clung onto the journal, its ink-stained pages a beacon of hope amidst the engulfing darkness. Her relative's final entries were a plea, not just for forgiveness, but for salvation. He had left behind the steps to break the cycle, the methods to vanquish the entity he had inadvertently released. The manor echoed Sarah's resolution. Its once intimidating architecture now provided solace, its hidden corners and whispered histories empowering her. Its silent presence was her stalwart companion, its every stone mirroring her resilience. In the bright light of the morning, Cloud Hollow seemed to hold its breath, the residents unknowingly dependent on Sarah's courage. The whispers of the townfolk had faded, replaced by an unsettling silence that seemed to cloak the quaint houses and cobblestone streets. With each deciphered clue from the journal, Sarah found herself drawn towards the manor's abandoned cellar. The haunting memories of her dreams coalesced with the cryptic symbols and instructions from the journal, guiding her to the heart of the cycle. As she descended into the bowels of the manor, she could feel the cycle's deadly pull. The very air was thick with a dark anticipation, the silence shattered by her solitary steps. The cellar, a forgotten testament of her relative's tragic folly, awaited her with bated breath. Sarah, armed with her unwavering resolve and the knowledge passed down through the journal, faced the darkness head-on. The terror was as real as the heartbeat in her ears, yet she felt an unprecedented courage surging within her. She was not merely a victim anymore, she was the cycle breaker. As she performed the counter-ritual outlined by her late relative, the entity materialized. A swirling mass of darkness, it towered over Sarah, its very presence a testament to fear and despair. Yet, Sarah did not falter. She spoke the incantations with unwavering conviction, her voice a beacon amidst the shadows. The entity, that towering, swirling mass of darkness, dissipated abruptly, shattering the oppressive silence of the cellar. But before Sarah could savor her supposed victory, a searing pain exploded at the back of her skull. The world tilted, colors and shadows blurring as she struggled to remain conscious. And then he was there. A ghastly figure, distorted and almost translucent, yet unmistakably her relative. His ethereal form hovered over her, his countenance twisted in a grimace of regret and despair, a paradox of the man he once was. Clutched in his spectral hand was the entity, no longer a chaotic swirl, but a concentrated sphere of darkness, pulsating with a chilling intensity. The entity moved closer, its ominous pulsations resonating with Sarah's fading heartbeat. As it approached, the pain dissipated, replaced with an icy numbness that seemed to creep into her very soul. The dread that once consumed her seemed distant, replaced by an inexplicable tranquility. As the darkness began to draw her in, just as it did in the relentless cycle of her nightmares, Sarah's consciousness began to fade. But instead of terror, she was enveloped by a strange sense of acceptance, a tranquility that whispered of an end to the torment. Her eyes fluttered close, the echo of her heartbeat a solemn farewell to the world she knew. The cycle was not broken, it was merely the beginning. And thus, dear listeners, concludes our eerie tale of terror. A storm of fear lives on, the cycle begins once again, and an ancient evil continues, but the shadows remain, eager to whisper tales of horror into the silent night. This is your host, bidding you a cautious farewell, till we meet again in the spine-chilling world of our scary stories. Remember, the darkness isn't void of life, it thrives with stories untold. Sleep tight, and don't let the shadows bite. This is our Scary Stories signing off for tonight.